Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the last day of the European AI Week. We have a very nice and interesting panel session lined up for you around the role of cross-border AI and the role that a coalition of the willing could play in that context. I say very welcome to everybody, but I should say good morning, but also good evening, because I know that there are even friends from Japan listening in. So thanks to them I think it's late afternoon there, to take the time to follow our conversation. I'm very curious to know who is listening in. So I would like to start this session with a little survey by using WooClap, and Casper, if you could put the link of WooClap. So please take your mobile phones and prepare to scan a QR code and tell us what background you have. So if you can put up the screen with the QR code. There we go. So just screen the QR code and we'll just answer to the first question. And we will see in real time what kind of public we have listening in. There's only one person who replied. Is that normal? Okay, it looks like something. I think WooClap is still in his wake-up status. Oh, there we go. I hope there are more than 2 people listening in. Is it possible that only the speakers can? No, it's more. Okay, now I see it happening. Okay, we'll give it a few more seconds, but it seems to me that we have already a winner, that the biggest audience comes out of public sector, followed by private sector and some NGO. Okay, let's just go to the next question. The second question I would like to know is who has already heard about this coalition of the willing and who hasn't? So give us a short view of that. Okay, if this is the trend, then probably the coalition of the willing has some work to do in getting themselves known. Okay, that seems to be clear that the coalition is not known, so we will work on that and try to explain. Okay, thank you, Casper. So let's go to the core of our discussion. By the way, my name is Frank Lehmann. I'm the head of international relations at BOSA, Digital Transformation Office in Belgium, and I will be hosting this session of today. What I would like to do is I have invited David Osimo from the Lisbon Council to do some kind of a setting of the scene, an opening statement. Now, David, for those who don't know them, is, as I said, he's a researcher at the Lisbon Council and is very active in diverse areas as data economy, digital government, future of work, as well as pioneering some novel collaborative methods for policy research. Now the Lisbon Council is a think tank very close to the European Commission and helping member states to formulate opinions and points of views that are very close to the political areas of what Europe is doing. So, David, I'm gonna give you the floor and ask you to set the scene. And as we discussed in our previous talks in the preparation of this, I have also invited you to put a question to the audience, the panel. So feel free to do that. So without further ado, I give you the floor.
Thank you very much, Frank. It's an honor to be here. I really look forward to listening more than to talking. And my role is, I've been asked to say a few words, basically to kick off the discussion, but I see my role as a Socratic, way to introduce and kick off the discussion, also to a question, as you said. Allow me to start with a joke and with a little play of words. Can we deliver AI in e-government? Yes, if we do it together at European level, cross-border. So let me get straight to the point. These are the three things that I want to say, and then I will illustrate them a little bit more in detail. Human centricity, we all agree, but what is it, human centricity or human-centric AI? I think we misread the Berlin Declaration. We focus too much on protecting against bias as misuse. This is very important, but the Berlin Declaration talks also about helping citizens and addressing societal challenges. And we all know that we don't lack common challenges across our countries. Second point, we need a large market to develop AI capabilities, and government, they can often talk about open markets, but in reality, when you look at public procurement, they are not particularly good at opening up their market to foreign and to other European countries, and we should work on that because AI needs scale and needs European scale to develop and to deliver impact. And the third point is, okay, AI is crucial, but we know government has this risk of jumping to the next thing without delivering on the existing one. So AI reminds us that we need to work on the building blocks, data quality and interoperability. No data quality, no AI party. So let's not once again repeat the mistake and jump on this new ship without taking care of the basics. And I will go a little bit more in detail on these 3 points. This is the Berlin Declaration. Applications that are inclusive, help solve societal challenge, and do not reproduce harmful and social or economic biases. Now, all I'm saying is we should take all of this into account. And at the moment, I don't think we take them into account in the same way. And the reason is, and this is, I don't know if you're familiar with Greek mythology, this is Scylla and Charybdis, 2 monsters of the Italian Sea between Sicily and Calabria. And the navigators had, and in Greek, the word is kybernetes, so that's where cyber comes from. So they have to navigate between Sicily, in this sea, and they had to avoid the 2 monsters. One is the monster of hype, Scylla, and the other one is the monster of fear, Charybdis. And this is a metaphor of what's happening in government when it deals with technology. We have 2 risks, and one is, hype, and technology will solve everything, just build it and they will come. And this is, I think we all know what I'm talking about. And the second is fear, and that is technology will destroy everything. In this case, machine will introduce biases in our pure and neutral human minds. And we all know that it's not the case. And the solution to avoiding this, and this is a permanent challenge for policymakers, especially in the technology fields where the debate is often difficult to understand for policymakers, is to steer the ship, focus on human-centric, keep the focus on human-centric, avoid the risk of hype and the risk of fears, and focus on what are the actual needs of citizens. And I think, in particular, when it comes to AI, we have some work to do because, honestly, if I think of the greatest application of AI in the public sector, most of them are in fraud detection. I remember a fantastic case study we did on Denmark a couple of years ago on the social benefits, on the AI agency, on the data analytics agency of the Danish government. It was amazing, but it also, we were looking for the top cases, and all the top cases we found, or most of them, were on fraud detection, either in benefits or in customs. So, on the other side, I think we should focus AI more on solving citizens' challenges. One example, which is not related to AI, but to technology, is from another speaker of today, the Portuguese social tariff, where basically energy social tariff, where basically citizens are pre-registered on a benefit. So this is not about fraud detection, it's about pre-registration for a benefit based on the data that government holds about them. And we can think of plenty of opportunities for pre-registration. And there is extensive literature on nudging and the role of pre-registration in influencing decisions, in particular when it comes to benefits. So I think if we want the trust of citizens, we need to show that technology is not there to hurt them, but to help them. And I think we should think more about services that help them. But of course, we know that AI has been applied to a very wide range in the private as in the public sector, to a very wide range, actually an increasing range of services. These are the data from the OECD about AI investment, venture capital investment. And you can see, I mean, there's clear growth over a year. This is in Europe, by the way, but the global patterns are similar. Media, business process, financial, healthcare, it's happening everywhere. And it's a further testimony to the diversity of applications and the opportunities that we face. And by the way, these opportunities, I don't think anyone can think of one of this sector as being mostly a national issue. Now, the issue is competition in this field is very tough. This is the venture capital investment overall. And you can see United States and China, this again from the OECD data. Europe is playing a smaller role, and European countries playing obviously a very small role. So this is another way to show that we need cross-border services and we need cross-border players. And we only get cross-border players if we have cross-border service, if we work together on shaping the demand. Now, this is the reality. We will not address effectively you will not get the best services for your citizens if you rely on national players. Now, we're not doing very well on this. This is not data about IT. These are data about the single market. But the reality is that at the moment, 5% of SMEs export in Europe, and government do not play a particularly facilitating role. The latest data from the EU are about 3.7% of contracts being assigned to providers from outside the country. So there is a lot of work to do in opening up our market, in creating a single AI market in Europe. And we need that badly, not just for our citizens, but also for our economy. So, this is an example of common use cases of AI that we work on in the case of ETAPAS in this very large partnership. HR management, patients assessment, local government chatbots, fake news detection. Who doesn't have this problem? Who doesn't deal with these issues? HR management in the public sector, I refer to. So there is plenty of opportunity to work together. We need to shape the demand and act on it. Now, I want to finish with a question, and that is not related particularly to AI, but that is a worry that I have, and I want to share it with all of you, because I'm not to be very open. I'm not very confident about the result that we're going to have based on, there was a lot of insistence on resilience recovering fund being non-conditional and being really, open, although we have the strategies, of course, and it's good. We have very good strategy, and the digital decade is one of them, is the most important one. But the problem has always been one of implementation. Now, I have an answer to this, and I want to mention this because it's my pet project, and I will repeat it anytime. And my answer is open adoption data. So if we make sure that every project funded through RRF has to publish on a monthly basis the number of users of the service, I think this creates an incentive. It's zero cost, and it creates an incentive to building services that really matter and that are really useful for our citizens. But that's just a very tiny ideas, but it's doable and easy to do. But this is the challenge, and I hope we really can do it. And I know that we can only do it together. So thank you very much.
Thank you, David. You really set the scene here. You gave us a few challenges. So where to start, I would say. Okay, what I understood is we are not human-centric enough. We could do better. We are still focusing too much on a national scale, and we don't have the reflex to work cross-border as a group, be it a coalition of the willing or Europe as a whole. And funding should be spent maybe a bit more efficiently in the future. I will submit that statement to our panelists. I see your question about the RRF. Let me put that a little bit on hold for a moment and start with the AI strategies of each of these countries. Before I do that, I forgot to mention that whoever listens in is welcome to put questions either in the chat room. There's a big group listening in through YouTube. Also there, you can put your questions, and my colleague Casper will look at that and tell me in due time when there is a question to be put to the panel. Okay, let me start by introducing the first panelist, and I'll introduce Ott Felsberg from Estonia. Ott is the Chief Data Officer of the Estonian government. He's overseeing data governance and data science in the Estonian government. And amongst other things, his mission is to lead the development of government services by using AI. He's also a PhD researcher in the Department of Informatics at the University of Umeå and Uppsala. But his research concentrates on the use of information systems in public sector with a specific focus on the use of IoT. So very competent person to introduce to begin with. Ott, I'm gonna immediately push you through to the Estonian national AI strategy that I read. And in there it says that your country will invest at least 10 million euros to the implementation of the AI strategy. Now we have seen that Estonia is doing quite well. There's an OECD report that shows that clearly. But what's struck me more specifically is that you mentioned that you would do quite a lot of investment in AI education. Now, I would like to know, was there a special reason to focus on education first? And tell me, where are you at this stage? What's the result of that investment on the AI side?
Hi, everyone. So right now, actually, when we talk about our current AI strategy, so I'm hoping to go with that to the government in upcoming weeks. For the next 2 years, we are planning for the investment to be roughly 25 million euros. So a little bit of an increase. But for the first 2 years from 2019 to 2021, it was indeed roughly around 10 million euros. And from that, a lot of investment did indeed go to education. I would say it was roughly about a quarter of all the investment. But why did we need to do that? So one of the first things when I joined the government was I started a data science master's degree program in our Estonian universities. So back then, we actually didn't have any specialized curriculum in Estonia that was basing on data science. At the same time, education, it is really to do with the current situation we have. There is a huge inflation. Even back then, we saw that the salary kind of expectations from the private sector side and from the public sector side, it was really difficult to find always people with enough competence. People, even within the private sector, didn't have the competence that we needed to make that push. So we had to invest a lot in educating the wider population. So our central government, if we don't include teachers and police and so on, is roughly 26,000 people. So within 2 years, we educated from them roughly 1,500 on basic data literacy skills. And this is something that we continue to do more. Data stewardship is another specialized program that we are focusing on. I also focus really strongly on project management skills. So it is about private sector as a counterpart that we collaborate with, but at the same time, we as a government, we need to have the basic knowledge to actually go into the procurement. We need to understand what is possible to do. So to tie that together, Frank, you asked where we are today. So in 2018, when I joined in August, we had a couple of AI use cases in the government, actually to be precise, 4. And today, with the solutions that we are or have implemented, we are looking roughly around 100 today. So, and the results in various areas have basically repaid in less than a year. So one of the most latest kind of interesting fun projects was related to tax authority, identifying people who are involved with VAT tax fraud. And it was a proof of concept project, but already during the proof of concept model validation, we found quite many different companies that were involved with VAT tax fraud. And a few months ago, we had our success whereby the court issued some of those companies to pay back hundreds of thousands of euros, while the project itself costed roughly 70,000. So it is a really kind of, with small investment, we get actually huge return. And at the same time, it is not only about efficiency, which is of course important when we talk about bureaucracy, but it is about providing services for citizens in an accessible way. So 2 weeks ago, I'm just going to do some advertisement. We put real-time subtitling on our national broadcasting. So people with visual hearing impairment can actually now get access to all TV, news, and so on our national broadcasting. So it is really important to improve citizens' kind of experience with the government.
So if I got you right, the return on investment, if I may say so, of the education can happen at a real short period. Yeah, you don't need to have full master educations to have effects on investment in education, apparently.
Absolutely. And the idea when we talk about educating in the public sector, those people who enroll in our data science project management course, they are going to be involved with data science project really quickly on. So they are typically business side people, but we also address technical and so on. But my strategic objective was really to concentrate on the business side. And we are not doing AI for the sake of AI. We're doing AI for the sake of improving the services. So this is important to just keep in mind.
Yeah, sure. Look, David, he stated that the countries are not enough oriented internationally. So what happened with the investment that you did? Was there a part oriented to international projects, or was the focus still too much on Estonia?
So we are actually very keen on collaboration outside, and it is also when we take our strategy, even our digital society strategy for 2030. This is kind of an umbrella strategy. Different forms of cooperation, they are focused for us, and it was the same with AI strategy as well that I formed. So for instance, we are right now implementing actually a solution developed by City of Amsterdam, public eye. So this is another example whereby open source solutions can be adapted in different countries. So I had a really great meeting with City of Amsterdam officials. So this was where that collaboration sparked. And similarly, our strategy is really built on building what we call kratiupid, or reusable open source AI components. So we're just bringing in those Estonian mythological aspect. Krat is a creature for us, and it is about open source. So we really need to collaborate, and we are right now building Bureaucrat, which is our virtual assistant. And I'm happy to say that today Bureaucrat went live in the first agency, and that solution is open source as well. We've been collaborating with less and more success with Canada, Finland. Also, we have had some discussions with Belgium, for instance, but there hasn't been any kind of practical cooperation. I think when it comes to coalition of the willing, we need to have a really unified strategic perspective in mind. So yesterday, I had a really nice discussion with Alexandra van Haffelen from Netherlands. And we need to start thinking in terms of unified projects that actually deliver value for us. So different members of the coalition of the willing need to be very willing in those projects. So this is a key aspect.
Absolutely. We'll come back on the coalition part of it. Thank you, Ott. Let me go to Christian Plaschke from Denmark. Now, Christian, he works for the Danish Agency for Digitization, and he is there the head of office of the Center for Technology and Data. Now, Christian, I also read your Danish AI strategy document, and I read in there that Denmark has a good starting point for using new technologies, but that you have identified some challenges like ethical issues of openness and of transparency, and that it also requires specialized labor. So could you elaborate a little bit on that? How big is the issue or the challenge, and what have you done with it?
Yes, first of all, thank you, Frank, and thank you for letting me be here. It's always interesting to hear views from other countries, and I really appreciate being part of that. So, and second of all, I would like to say that when I hear you, David, and also you, Ott, I totally agree on most of your points, and I think we're facing very similar problems, and we also have quite similar strategies on how to cope with them. I can hear from you, Ott. So, but if we dive into the issue of biases, which is of course a complex one, because in a way you can say that all AI has biases. That's essential to it, because otherwise it wouldn't work. So the question is, how do we work with those biases, and how do we control them and accept the ones that we agree on? Because the essence of many AI applications is to take knowledge from the past and use it to foresee something. So So we need some kind of biases in our work. So I don't think there are any absolutes here. You can't do bias-free AI applications in the theoretical sense, at least. So it's all about being pragmatic and working with biases and being transparent about the limitations of what you got. But this is a complex issue, and how did we deal with it in Denmark? I would like to point out 3 initiatives, which is not everything we do, but are 3 cornerstones dealing with biases and ethics. And first one is that we launched a data ethics council, and this is to promote a dialogue in society of how is data being used primarily by the public sector, and what issues should normal citizens be scared of or happy about. And this council is also a place where public agencies can ask for advice when developing AI solutions, so that they can get advice on how to deal with ethical issues and also when to stop. So this is one initiative from the Danish government, which is all about promoting dialogue. Then we also work with on the business side to promote a certification scheme on ethical use of data. So we work with businesses in formulating a pragmatic certification scheme on what is ethical use of data, and can you what could be done there to promote transparency about how companies work, and can get companies to go into such a certification scheme. And then thirdly, I would say that we put continuously a lot of work into working with public sector data, because when doing AI with public sector data, it's essential that data quality plays an essential role, and good metadata on how is data constructed and what biases does it have is essential for building robust solutions. So we put a lot of work into working with our public sector data and to get it better and doing good metadata, so we know what we're talking about, because a lot of problems when dealing with AI projects and digital projects in general is shit in, shit out. So if there's problems with data, you will also have problems with the applications. So that's the third initiative that I would like to say that's where we put a lot of work in Denmark.
Thank you, Christian. I think I've seen everybody just not to say, yeah, me too. We have the same, let's call it the price to pay to learn about the technology and to make it better and useful. Something else that struck me in the Danish strategic report was a mention about Danish being a small language, and that in the AI context that sometimes is an additional challenge compared to a country who has using maybe English, which is much more commonly used. So and that brings us immediately to the cross-border aspect of it. So tell me a little bit about that challenge, and where are you? Did you manage to address it, or how do you tackle it in Denmark?
Well, it's again, it's a complex issue. I mean, when you look at AI applications, you will have we will find that most AI applications deal with language in some form. It might be that you use your voice to activate it or steer it. It might be that it uses text to analyze what does it. It can use language in many forms, and it's not a big secret that the bigger the language, the more the data, and the more the data, the more you will have applications that are trained and robust. So having a small language, there's not a lot of people on this globe talking and writing in Danish. We do have a bit of a problem because we're always a bit behind when it comes to applications being originally developed in English. So we've put a lot of energy recent on this issue, and what we're doing is that we're gathering all what we call language resources in Danish, and putting them out there for free use for companies. And we're developing new language resources, new language data that companies can train on, so that we can see a boost in the development of Danish AI applications. And as you said, this course has cross-border aspects and non-cross-border aspects, because a lot of it is to do with Danish being a weird language. So we need some purely Danish resources to cope with that. But we also work with projects as e-translation from the EU, which I think is a great project when it comes to putting a simple translation service out there. So we can use that. We use that when working with translation in Denmark, and it makes a lot of sense to do it cross-border, so we all have the same tools. So that could be further developed, and it makes a lot of business sense for us.
Thank you, Christian. Ott, you just mentioned that you have this real-time subtitle application. Is that only in Estonian, or does it also understand Danish, for instance?
So unfortunately, not Danish. However, we are right now looking into providing additional synchronous translation, but right now it is only, unfortunately, in Estonian. There is an English, of course, but we are looking into what we can do for the Ukrainian refugees as well that are coming to Estonia. So this is still an ongoing process. But overall, I really believe that the technology itself can help a lot in integration of people. So even if we take our national broadcasting, it is today in Estonian. However, we have in Estonia, I have lived for a quite long time in Sweden. You have different minorities, and the minorities sometimes they form quite large groups. So providing information or access to different groups of people that otherwise would be isolated, I think this is a right way to go.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Ott. Well, there is one country with which we share the same language, that's with the Netherlands. So let me go to Marika van Putten. Marika, she is a senior innovation manager at the Ministry of Interior and Kingdom Relations. And she develops policy and action plans on innovation in digital services. And she very actively follows technology trends like, I guess, AI being one of them. And she's responsible for setting up experiments and doing tenders with AI and other data-related public services. Marika, I did the same. I also read the Dutch strategic AI plan. And there is a passage that I was intrigued with, which I'm going to read loud up. So this plan says that the following principles are leading for the Dutch approach. We work together publicly and privately, for example, in the Dutch AI Coalition, in order to utilize the social and economic opportunities of AI. We profile ourselves as a country that leads the way with AI applications. We choose an inclusive approach that puts people focus, striving for reliable AI. And the Netherlands is committed to international cooperation, especially with European partners. That's quite a lot of cross-border angle that I read there. So tell me a bit more about it. Where are you? How far are you? What have you been able to realize in the cross-border angle?
Yeah, and also on the national level, because that's where you start out. Huh?
Yeah, sure.
And because back in 2018, AI was basically, well, done in different places, but we didn't have any strategy or cooperation whatsoever. Stimulated also by the EU and leading countries like France, we developed, like you said, a strategic action plan, and both the public and the private side are heavily investing in AI. We actually, the Netherlands AI Coalition got 276 million euros for the strategic plan. And we focus on two areas. The one is actually realizing projects, demand-based, as some of the others also mentioned. And the other part is what we call ethical, legal, societal aspects labs. So we're really looking into the human-centric side of it all. And we do believe in public-private cooperation in different ways. Some of the challenges are public and private, like mobility, sustainability, but we also believe in innovation procurement, which was in the opening speech. And I do believe, if I look at the public side, we have a whole range of activities. We do research every 2 years on the AI in the public sector. And where you see it the most is actually in those areas where you have a lot of data and a lot of money being spent. And that's basically also in the city. So cities like Amsterdam that were mentioned are very active. And what we do, and I think you can do it cross-border. Ott, I really like what you said. We are heading 2 projects in the Coalition of the Willing, which I will mention later on. What we do in the Netherlands, actually, we have a lot of satellite data, and we use it together with remote sensing in different public and private areas, from you know, our plant diseases, what's going on with the roads, all kinds of inspections. And what we do, we actually create buyer groups, and you don't necessarily do a joint procurement, but what you do is actually talk about the human-centric aspects, the legal aspects, the data that you need, the quality of data. In a later stage, you connect to markets, to the market, and ranging from SMEs to larger companies. And I think that one would actually be excellent to do cross-border, because why would you limit that to your own country? And like you said, Frank, we really believe in a strong international cooperation. Our cities believe in it, where a lot of money is spent, but also on a national level. We already work a lot with Germany and Belgium, as you know. That's been there for years. And our former state secretary, he actually started the Coalition of the Willing because he said digitalization should be done cross-border, focusing also on technologies like AI. So we have a range of countries ranging from Estonia, which Ott already mentioned, Denmark, Belgium, of course, Germany, France, Portugal. And with those countries, we actually look at different areas. And the first time is also spent on getting to know each other, identifying what can be done. And I know on AI, and you have been active in that as well, we have been focusing on building blocks, data building blocks, but also database of use cases. And I think it's important to take the next step and to see if you can identify similar projects like chatbots that were mentioned, but maybe also in the sustainable area, which is also a strong focus of the European Commission. And what I noticed initially, also in the EU, but sometimes even on a national scale, that the public sector is widely overlooked. We spend a lot of money. We are crucial in public services, but also in mobility and sustainability. So I strongly believe in that we should focus on it. And I know our new minister, Alexandra van Huffelen, but also in our public-private cooperation, we believe in human-centric AI, but at the same time, demand-based experimenting and realizing and upscaling. That's where you really need the cross-border aspect. I used to do an innovation procurement program, and that was very international. And we worked with London, unfortunately, no longer, the UK is no longer in the EU, and Bremen. And we actually identified areas, in this case, lighting in historic buildings, where you really need to work cross-border because some markets are far too small. So that's my, and we really want to take the next step in the coalition of the willing, and also in other types of cooperation being initiated by other countries or the EU.
Thank you, Marika. You give us the proof that there is really a possibility to do things cross-border. I would just want to go back to the discussion I had at the beginning with Ott around education. Did you also in the Netherlands experience challenges on getting people skilled in AI, and what did you do about it?
Yeah, actually, that's a really important topic as well. We have a digital inclusion program, and we focus actually on two areas. First of all, getting citizens aboard, don't leave anybody behind. So we have digital inclusion programs. And one of the newest initiatives in the Netherlands AI Coalition is actually what we call the AI Parade. We go to libraries and explain to people, show people what you can do in AI. So that's an initiative. And on the other side, we are also working into in the European Digital Innovation Hubs, and we have a public one. And I think it's also because we don't realize that we have all these innovative companies developing great solutions, but they have to be implemented. So there's also an important knowledge transfer to maybe the older generation still working, or even young people, but companies that really have to do the daily business, and they don't always know the latest technology. So those are two areas we're focusing on.
Okay, so there is, on one side, you have this education of your population or of your industry, but you also have the education of your internal colleagues to be able to realize these projects. Do you think there is a specific education needed for cross-border projects, or do you say if you know the national, you know the international?
I think always, I think if you work international, and it's not necessarily technical, but you also have to work with different cultures, different habits. I also liked what some of my colleagues, said on the language being used. Like Belgium and Denmark, we have a language nobody speaks except for in South Africa. And it was mentioned in the opening speech. Very few companies actually take part in our tenders, and they're mainly in the Dutch language. So I know our language skills are way better than they were 20 or 30 years ago, but that's still a very important focus, the culture and the language and how it's been done. And you might be, I know Estonia is really far ahead, but has a different, slightly different approach. You have to take that into account. You might have other solutions. We all have a certain infrastructure. So there are many different aspects to take into account, but it shouldn't prevent us from doing it.
Thank you, Marika. Let me go to the last but not least panelist of today, which is Antonio Soares from Portugal. Well, Portugal is a country we work very closely together with, not because we speak the same language, but we have some kind of a same understanding of approach to build public services. Antonio, his background is a physics engineering, specialized in energy and environment. He was a researcher in the field of geophysics and energy efficiency, where he designed and built data acquisition systems. Now, in the private sector, he worked as a data scientist and an AI engineer, helping companies make better data-driven decisions. But now he works for AMA, which is the Agency for the Modernization of the Administration in Portugal. And he works there on subjects of open data, data-driven policies, emerging technologies, and AI ethics. So, Antonio, same challenge for you. I also read the Portuguese AI strategic report for 2030, an innovation and growth strategy to foster AI in Portugal in the European context. So the title itself already announces the European angle. And also there are a few things that took my attention. It says that you want to work on areas of specialization with an international impact, natural languages processing, areas of research and innovation in EU and international networks. And you want to integrate a strategy of closer cooperation between European AI excellence centers around agendas fixed together with industry and based on common knowledge and common challenges for the deployment of AI-based solutions. So it's very European oriented, this strategy. I think if I benchmark all the reports that I've mentioned, I think you guys mostly mentioned a European dimension. So, well, same question to you. Where is Portugal at that stage? What have you implemented, and what did you get out of this international strategy?
Hello, everyone. Well, this national strategy for artificial intelligence, that is called AI Portugal 2030, was made on 2019 and was developed on the Foundation for Science and Technology. And it is based on several action lines, and a few of them are indeed towards the European context. So on this strategy, we promote areas for research and innovation in European and international networks. We have a lot of relevant investment of European companies in Portugal in several domains, such as automotive, intermodal transports, information systems, components and service for 5G networks, banking, bioeconomy, and biorefineries. We have now on the field several joint ventures that are already in action in fields like sustainable energy systems, mobility and autonomous driving, cybersecurity, health, and industry. On this, in this strategy, we also have other action lines. One that is important is to secure AI niche markets through key specialized services in Portugal, as you mentioned, for example, natural language processing, real-time AI, and AI for edge computing. As well, in the European context, we foster Portugal as a living lab for experimentation and new developments, namely in sustainability, sustainable cities and sustainable energy networks and blue economy. Concrete actions that are already in the field since this strategy was made are digital innovation hubs to facilitate the uptake of AI. We have specific calls, research calls for projects on the application of AI in the public sector. So these are made by research teams at the European level. We have several collabs to foster cooperation between most of these leading companies that are coming from the context, European context, and research centers. And we have other programs like talent attraction through programs like Study and Research in Portugal. These are the main action lines to answer to your question.
Thank you, Antonio. Same question to you. We talked about the challenge of the education and the challenge of languages. So can you tell me a little bit how did Portugal encounter these challenges?
Yes, of course. I think it's a very relevant subject. One of the action lines is inclusion and education. We want to foster AI skills and digital minds for all at early stage of education, long life learning. So education is really a very important subject. Relating to the second question, can you repeat, please?
On the language.
On the language, of course, yeah. Well, we have a very strong AI research community on natural language processing. I have summer schools for that subject in the universities. Portuguese is a very widespread spoken language in the world. So we have lots of data from different parts of different geographies in the world. And for instance, we made a big step the last 2 years, boosted by the COVID, on public service using the virtual assistants where language is very important. We have a portal that is called ePortugal for public service with hundreds of public services across all the government sectors. And it's based on a virtual assistant made, of course, with AI, with natural language processing. And it was really important. It works very well. So I think for this virtual assistant, interoperability of the different sectors is very important. I think it's a very important thing also for AI solutions cross-border. Basically, it's this. The virtual assistant name is Sigma, and it can also, besides providing relevant information for the service, can also do most of the service process, if not all the process. So it's very useful and centered on the human citizens and business needs.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, we are 1 hour already into the panel discussion. I would like to now look to my colleague Kasper to see if there are any questions from the YouTube channel or this channel. So Kasper, I think there was a question from Alessandro.
Yes, Frank, there is a question from Alessandro, and I will give him the floor so he can use that to address this question to the panelists. Alessandro, you should be able to unmute now and ask your question. Thank you.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. First of all, very interesting panel, so thank you for organizing it. My question was mostly related to David's speech at the beginning, but I think it applies to the whole panel here. And the question is, so we're talking about hype and fear and the necessity of framing AI use in the public sector, but also in general, in the right way to avoid being unbalanced towards one or the other direction. And regulatory sandboxes seem to me as a good tool to do that. Indeed, the AI regulation, the proposed AI regulation includes regulatory sandboxes as a possible tool. However, the regulation won't be enforced before a couple of years, I believe, more or less. Plus, when it comes to cross-border initiatives, AI regulatory sandboxes seem to be more of a conundrum than it is in a national context. So my question would be, if it is, what would be the suggestion from the panelists towards a more EU level steering committee towards regulatory sandboxes, or something more decentralized with pros and cons that of course come with both approaches?
Very interesting question. So who wants to take up the challenge? Okay, Christian, give it a go. You need to unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'll give it a go. So I think it's a really good question. First of all, so thank you for that. And I think when we look at the new regulation concerning AI, then striking the right balance between ensuring responsible use of AI and not creating overload of unsecurity and documentation needs and all of other aspects that can create transaction costs when developing AI is the big problem. So we need to ensure that that the central part of the legislation is clear enough so that it won't create too much transaction costs when doing projects. And of course, sandboxes can play a huge part in ensuring how to interpret the legislation. And if that's too decentralized, then we will have different interpretations all over Europe and different traditions on different stuff. So I think how to deal with that, I think it all starts out with the legislation, and I think it's really it's going to be hard, but it's really important to ensure that right balance between not making demands on AI too burdensome for governments and companies to deal with, and at the same time making it clear. And that's going to be really hard. And I think when it comes to sandboxes, I'm all for having decentralized sandboxes as well, because what we see in Denmark, at least, is that the devil's in the detail. You need to know a lot about the in-depth knowledge of how does this technology actually work in order to do a legal interpretation of, is it on the green side or a yellow or a red side. So I think I think we need decentralized sandboxes that can go really deep into projects, but I also think that there's a huge role to play centrally on ensuring that legislation is strikes the right balance. I don't know if that was a good enough answer.
I fully agree. David, I see you want to make a comment.
Yes, it's a very interesting topic, and I wrote in the chat that we are been working on this. My emphasis would be sandboxes is really important, but they are not sufficient, especially when you deal with large-scale deployment. We know that with large number of users, it's very difficult to simulate the impact, depending on the application, obviously, but say a recommendation system, for instance, when you deploy it, there is a huge difference between what you can do in a sandbox and what you can do in the reality. So I think there should be a lot of emphasis on ex post and in itinerary monitoring. Even, sandboxes are good in this interim period. They are fundamental because these things you cannot plan ex ante. You have to look at how they deploy. But when you deploy it after the sandbox, it needs continuous monitoring and evaluation of performance. And to be honest, it's not different from what we should do for any government service. If you have an algorithm that assigns children to schools, or if you have people who decide which children should be going each school, we still should have in itinerary evaluation and monitoring. It's not because AI, we are asking of AI, we should, but things that we don't do for people. And it's not that we should not, but we should also do it for people. This should be a core part of government activities.
Exactly. Look, I would like to go back to the three challenges that David put in his opening speech on us, which was we should be more human-centric with AI. We should be more open. The market should be more open and stimulated. And we need to do something on data quality and interoperability. So, Ott, what are your reactions on these three challenges, and where is Estonia in this regard? Are they justified, and is that a real challenge we need to tackle?
So the challenges are extremely relevant. So our strategic objective was really to just kick off and get experience. And one of the major issues we have seen is actually related to data governance. So data findability, usability, quality of data. And for the last few years, it has been a strategic objective for us. As part of that, we have transformed, or we are in midst of transforming our Statistics Estonia to a data governance competence center. So this was something that we really copied to some extent from Netherlands, also from New Zealand, Canada. So we've had really nice visits to Netherlands regarding this. So it is an issue. And the issue I see right now is that the Data Act, which just a few weeks ago came out, it addresses interoperability. But the requirements on the interoperability itself and the standards, they are quite harsh right now, but it's a right direction because there has been a lack in Europe for a very long time. Either we are talking about open data or even data services. So there hasn't been any kind of, for instance, metadata standard. It has only been kind of a recommendation. And I myself, what we have done is we considered all those standards already. So our Estonian metadata standard is based on TCAT application profile. So we have an extension, TCAT APEE. So for us, it's a right direction. But the problem is still that even though we are investing a lot right now in data quality, data metadata, then data lifecycle, this is something that no one almost considers, and it's an issue, I guess.
That's a very good point. Antonio, in Portugal, do you have the same impression on what Ott just mentioned with regards to data? And I would like to, at the same time, put the same question with the three challenges that David put. What is Portugal doing there?
Yes, relating to what Ott mentioned, we have the same problems. The next year, we are going to make a big effort at our agency to improve the quality of data, because we manage the open data portal for the public administration at the national level, and we are very concerned about the quality and metadata in particular. Relating to human-centric, since David mentioned the social tariff for electricity in Portugal, I think it's a very good example of the good side of human-centric, not only the bad side, the fraud detection and so on. And people benefit automatically from these price electricity reduction. And this works because there's also interoperability among the different entities of the public sector. So it's a good example. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Antonio. I'm going to go back to Marika. Marika, there's another challenge and a question that David put on us. That was with regards to funding and whether the RRF budget or budget in general is well spent, yes or no. So do we really spend our money well, or is there room for improvement, do you think?
There's always room for improvement. What is very important, I think, in any case, is to be demand-based. I mean, if there isn't a need or a challenge or something you have to solve using AI, then don't do it, whether you get money or not. So, and what I see, when is money wisely spent, and when is there also energy and taking it to the next level when there is a demand? So if I look at our on the national scale, because then I take it back to the Netherlands, RFF is quite a complicated procedure. So that's sometimes really tough. How is that going to be? And that's very much on a central level. So that one is a bit difficult. If I look at the strategic programs that we have and the opportunities in different goals, I think then there is a good opportunity to do it the right way. And that's easier. And but in general, yeah, I think it's definitely an issue. And what I also believe in, David mentioned procurement and innovation procurement. That's also a little bit related to the sandbox. It may be a bit off topic, but use the different instruments in innovation procurement. And you also have pre-commercial procurement, hackathons, do it on a small scale, but always demand-based. And then you don't spend a lot of money on one large project, which doesn't take place. And what we see in the Netherlands when we use pre-commercial procurement, organizations, both on the company side as on the civil servant side, they get used to it. And they use it for the right reasons. And if it doesn't go through, then you don't spend a lot of money on an enormous project that you can't stop. And I also think if you can do it on the national scale, you can also do it on the international scale. So I believe in that. But sometimes these large funds, that was also your questions, I find it a bit harder and then there's smaller calls.
Okay, so challenge that I put then to Christian. Did Denmark spend RRF budget on one of these three challenges that David mentioned? Human-centric AI, stimulating open markets, and data quality and interoperability. Is there a direct link in your country?
Well, at least these are definitely well-known topics that we work a lot with. I would say that one thing I'm concerned about when we're talking EU-funded projects and cross-border projects, and how do we steer it, is that I think there's sometimes a tendency that they get a little too much on the concerned with the hype. I think we all know that if we all want the business prospect of the project, the demand side, to be steering what kind of projects do we want, and that's all about implementation. That's all about getting enough citizens to use it. But a lot of projects are focused on building stuff, and that's I think that concerns me because that will mean that some of the money spent won't be well spent, because well spent money means ensuring the implementation side and putting focus on that, because that's how you get your investment back. So I think when it comes to EU funding, I think we should look more on implementation side. So try to get that into the projects that we need to have a high uptake. If you don't end there, then money won't be well spent. But I don't have a super bullet for how to ensure that. But I think I think that's a concern for us.
Absolutely. Well, talking about uptake, that could take a complete other panel discussion. I see that Ott has raised his hand. Ott.
Yes, just to add the same topics. We have actually 4 major changes, and 2 of them. One is data governance, and the second one is related to AI. And so together with the team, we try to make one of them is investment, and the other one is a reform for us, so related to data governance. So I think RRF is for us a really great mechanism right now to utilize. However, what I have seen is that what RRF was supposed to be in the beginning, it's not turning out to be exactly what it was advertised, perhaps. But all in all, it is always the problem with European structural funds, that finding the balance between agility and rules and mechanism that have set. So we need to use what we have, basically.
I think everybody agrees with that. I'm going to go back to Marike for the last question, which is more related to the Coalition of the Willing. Now, you mentioned it already. Netherlands has been the initiator of the Coalition of the Willing. Maybe for those who are listening in and do not know the Coalition of the Willing, maybe you want to just redefine what it is, and then I will put the question to all of you, which is what can the Coalition of the Willing do to make happen what we have been discussing for 1 hour now? So what role can we play there, Marike?
Yeah, like I mentioned, the Coalition of the Willing, it's an informal cooperation of European countries. And we started out with the 8 that I mentioned, and we focus, because we actually, what we did, and I think that's a really good one, we looked at the agenda together. What topics do we identify? And we identified 4 topics: AI, public services, cross-border public services, digital identity, and data and open source, which is very much also linked to AI. We put up an agenda, and we have working groups led by 2 countries, and AI is led by Estonia and Belgium. And the challenge, of course, is I think we were really impressed in what the countries delivered and how much time they devoted. The EU also said to us, it's really good, because in a lot of cases, these corporations just have one meeting every half year and an agenda. You're really working. But of course, we are ambitious. And I very much agree that we also should focus on cross-border pilots, projects, and upscaling. The team that was also here, and identifying challenges like the sandboxes that were mentioned, and between fear and hope. Yeah, I'm very interested. Of course, we have our own ideas, and in the fall we will have a meeting in The Hague physically, we hope. So we have all the time to exchange new ideas and new initiatives. So that's very welcome.
Thank you, Marika. Over to Christian. Christian, what can the Coalition of the Willing do to make it happen?
Well, I think, as I said, I think, just talking and exchanging experiences has great value. And talking to other countries with a similar mindset and is even more fruitful. So that's first of all. I think also when dealing with the European Union, having similar thoughts and putting focus on the same ideas. And I talked earlier on striking the right balance, for example, on the new AIA, something that we can cooperate on. And that's and also I think different projects or targeted areas. I think we could do a lot. We all have projects concerning language take or NLP. We all deal with data governance and the gap between what we should and what we actually do. How do we cope with that? We all have discussions on open source and different other technologies and GovTech and how we deal with the market and procurement rules, etc. So I think there are plentiful of topics, and I think it's great we're willing to look at many different concrete initiatives.
Thank you. Ott, question to you. Do you think that the Coalition of the Willing needs to take the lead in the cross-border focus of projects? Is that a role that we need to take up there?
I think this is definitely something that we should consider and have at least few lighthouse projects. And based on that, we can decide. So I think it could be an incremental. So let's start this year by doing at least one pilot project cross-border. And if that is a success, we can continue. Definitely when it comes to AI regulation, Data Act and so on, it is a fruitful and a great coalition to discuss and share common values, and at the same time the differences as well. So this is in the end what enriches all of us, from the different values, finding common values and building better Europe and improving our citizens' customer life. So I would just really have a practical way this year, and let's have at least one project all together. Yeah, informal and practical. Antonio, same question to you. What role do you see for the Coalition of the Willing here?
First of all, I will accept the challenge of Ott to develop this cross-border solution. I think the Coalition of the Willing is a good opportunity for knowledge sharing. And I could learn a lot of use cases in the other countries, and eventually to reuse those ideas. And I know there are always also open source solutions that can be taken by other countries. So I think it's a good opportunity for knowledge sharing mostly. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. So, well, we all agree that we have some role to play within that coalition. I'm going to go back to David. we started with your opening impressions. I'm gonna give you the floor to wrap it up and tell me what do you take out of this conversation?
Well, it was great. I think we all noticed that it worked. It ticked. We were on the same wavelength, and I was stricken by the change in tone. You know, when I work in digital government for many, many years, unfortunately, and at the beginning it was all about, oh, we invest this, oh, we invest and we do this. And now it's about results. It's about, and the conversation is much more specific. It's not about hype. It's about concrete problems, things to fix. And there is dramatic shift in tone. And as part of this dramatic shift is the real understanding and embracing by all of us of the term ecosystem. And this means how many of us spoke about the role of the private sector, the importance of citizens, the role of cities, the role of collaboration at EU level, the importance of reusing solution and education. And this is basically what this is about, moving from, updating government processes and government machinery to acting on the ecosystem. And this is the most important thing. So I'm really impressed by the discussion, and I take back a lot of insight and interesting solution, but I'm also aware of one thing: bias. I think this was a biased conversation because you had some of the best people and countries, and I don't think this is the reality across all of Europe. So I just wanted to point out this. This is not a representative sample. The data quality, I want to check the metadata of the people invited. But, and let me just add one more thing, and sorry to insist, but I really feel strongly about it. You said there is no silver bullet for making RF, and it's true. But I think open adoption data can be important, because if you are to report monthly how many people use it, how many cities, imagine, I remember the Danish case, why they were successful. Well, of course, they saved a lot of money, but they were able to engage all cities. All the cities were engaged in this AI system for social services. And so this uptake indicator doesn't only mean the final user, everyone, the ecosystem uptake by the ecosystem, by the private sector, by other cities, by other governments. But thank you very much. It was really fun, not just interesting.
Thank you, David. I think we all agree that in order to succeed, we need to be much more citizen-centric, because if we reply to a need from a citizen and we offer him the response, he will inevitably use the service and the uptake will be better. And that for me is the best proof that is in the tasting of the pudding. So, and with regards to the selection of this panel, it was pure coincidence. There is no strategy behind it, just friendly, interesting people I wanted to invite to talk about the same topic. So with that being said, I would like to thank each of you for your time you've taken, for your insights. I found it also very instructive. I thank my colleague Casper, who has assisted me in preparing this and making sure that we stay live. We need to do a little bit fine-tuning on the Woo Club thing, but that's a detail. I only would like to mention that there is another session following this one at 11:30, and that is about enabling AI in public services, focusing on public services, and we have some interesting, specifically academic people who will give their insights on that. So that's at 11:30. So with that being said, thank you very much, everybody. Have a nice end of day, end of week, and see you soon.